FatEnzo.com, 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 FatEnzo.com.
Welcome to the Bobby Pickles podcast. I'm Bobby Pickles. On this episode of the podcast, I'm interviewing the curator of the Italian-American Museum on Mulberry Street, Dr. Joseph V. Scelsa. Now, before we get to the interview, I'd like to start off with a segment entitled New York City Subway Music. This is an awesome ska punk-ish kind of band from Brooklyn. They're called Karikatura.
The song is called Horns of Love. Come, the miserable horns of love. Oh, oh, there they go, the miserable horns of love. There was a stranger passing through my town. I didn't recognize. Two sharp horns on a jagged face and cold and lonely eyes. Wandered through the desert and found its way to me, and I felt a strange attraction when I saw it in the street. But I had to let it be. No, I couldn't let it end, because the thing I feared the most were those horns under my skin. Thinking about those eyes, so full of, who regrets again, forget the horns of the miserable horns of love. Oh, oh, there they go, the miserable horns of love. I know, oh, here they come, the miserable horns of love. I know, oh, there they go, the miserable horns of love. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are Karikatura from Brooklyn, New York. If y'all like the music, we have CDs with these songs on them. You can take one home with you for just a $10 donation, or both of our CDs for only $15. We hope y'all keep in touch with us. Sign up for the mailing list or grab one of these cards. We are playing a show tomorrow night at Mehanata Bulgarian Bar on Ludlow Street, and you can find the details on our website or on our Facebook page. But also stick around because we're going to keep on playing more tunes.
If you're interested in learning more about Karikatura, you can visit their website, which is karikaturanyc.com. Karikatura.
Bobby Pickles podcast. He always says, "That's me." With a look on his face, he'll talk about anything. Tattoos, t-shirts, politics, history, and hot sauce on everything. Bobby Pickles. Pop culture, documentaries, conspiracy theories, sarcasm, and beer. It's a conversation. Start listening, cause we're all here. Bobby Pickles podcast.
That's me. Pronto, Vinny qua. Welcome to episode 17 of the Bobby Pickles podcast. Today, I am podcasting from the Italian American Museum on Mulberry Street. My guest is Dr. Joseph V. Scelsa, the museum's founder and president. Dr. Scelsa is the consummate academic and has many degrees and distinctions, a doctorate in sociology and education from Columbia, plus a long career as director of the Italian American Institute, developing a variety of courses for the City University of New York. Although founded in 2001, the doors to this particular building opened in 2008 at the heart of Manhattan's Little Italy, the former Banca Stabile, or Banca Stabile, which I imagine is the correct pronunciation. The Italian American Museum is host to numerous exhibitions. It's an awesome place to visit if you're in the area. Dr. Scelsa, thank you so much for speaking with me today on the Bobby Pickles podcast. I very much appreciate it.
Bobby, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for coming to the museum.
Absolutely. This is an honor. Thank you for having me in here. What a great place to have a podcast in the heart of Little Italy, which was once Little Italy, right? I mean, now gentrification has taken over, and you're a lifelong New Yorker, correct?
Well, I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I wasn't born down here. My father was.
He was?
Not too far, just a few blocks from where we sit right here today.
So he was born in America, right?
Oh, yeah. My dad was born in America in Little Italy in 1910.
Wow.
My grandparents came here in 1900.
Where did they come from?
A little town in Sicily, just in the province of Palermo, in the region in Sicily, where the name of the town was Cacamo. My grandfather was 13 years old. He came with his father, which was my great-grandfather, Bartolomeo. They came to America and they became barbers.
They became barbers? That's a great profession, right?
There were a lot of barbers in Little Italy in those days. There seemed to be like one or two. They were like local clubs almost, where men would go and get shaves and haircuts and manicures, and they would just have local talk with each other.
Mm-hmm.
The apartments were so small that people spilled out onto the streets and into the shops to really do their socializing. They didn't do a lot of socializing indoors. Most of it on the stoops.
When you grew up, where did you grow up in New York?
Well, I was born and raised in the Bronx. I was born in the Belmont section of the Bronx, which, of course, is the Little Italy section.
That is the Little, right? Arthur Avenue?
Absolutely.
I got to tell you, let me share a little story. So I'm from Florida originally, but my parents are from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and they fled down there. I was born and raised in Florida. However, when I got up here, from the movies and everything like that, you get this, like, the quintessential Italian neighborhood or Irish neighborhood or whatever it is, and they seem to have dried up now. I went on a quest. I went down to Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst area, went up to Arthur Avenue, checked that out. They still, there are Italians there, but they're the old school Italians, none my generation or anything. It seems like a lot of people have left.
I will say that although that's my Little Italy, where I was born and raised, but it still has an Italian feeling to it.
It definitely
very
does.
much so. And you have some Italian stores there that you don't have down here in Little Italy in Manhattan. I mean, you've got Biancardi's, the meat store. You've got Randazzo's, the fish store. You've got Calandra, the cheese store. You've got Adio Brothers and Madonia Brothers, the bakery shops, and they have the market over there. Plus a lot of good restaurants. So it has a very much Italian feel on Arthur Avenue. Little Italy down here in Manhattan is a lot different. It's much smaller, and it's only about 3 blocks long today. They say that we have Nolita in the north of us, which they say is northern.
North of Little Italy, right?
Well, it's northern Little Italy to me, because northern Little Italy is probably going to move down and become all of Little Italy eventually, because the properties are flipping, they're changing. A lot of young, upwardly mobile professionals are moving in. The rents are outrageous. There's a lot of them becoming condos. So more and more of the old school people are leaving. Very often, the Italian Americans who ran these shops and stores, their children don't want to do that type of work. They don't want to work 12, 14 hours a day. They want to work as professionals 7, 8 hours a day. And then they want to. It's not the kind of lifestyle they want anymore. So they leave these businesses, and they're not picked up by their children.
That's too bad, too, because I feel like those businesses would be way more fulfilling for their lives than to join some corporate structure.
Well, it's interesting. Although they're not all Italian, these little shops that are opening up, these little boutiques that are all around here, that's very much what the Italian-American neighborhood was like before. There was all these little shops. Now they're not all Italian, but they're all little shops, and people like that.
Oh, I have an experience for Little Italy here on Mulberry Street. So I went, brought my girlfriend out here like a couple years ago, and we ate. I forgot the name of the restaurant, and the guy who was the waiter was putting it on so much. He was really over the top. I'm Italian, right? He had the accent going and everything.
And you found out he was Albanian, probably.
Yeah, he was. I go. I was like, "Where are you from in Italy, man?" Because I have family in Italy, and he's like, "Brooklyn." I was like, "Really? Wait, what do you mean?" And yeah, he said he was Lithuanian or something like that.
Right. There are only a few of the establishments here that are still owned and operated by the original families. Across the street you have Angelo's, which is from 1902, and that's still original. The oldest Italian restaurant still in operation here in Little Italy. You also have Vincent's on Hester Street, 1903, which is still operated by the same family as well. And Ferrara's also, although they've changed owners, it's still an Italian operation. But a lot of the other restaurants are not only not owned by Italians, they're not manned by Italians. The waiters are from different parts of the world, and the cooks and chefs as well. But it is an Italian experience when you do come down here. You do get the feeling for what New York was like, and that's why the museum wanted to be here. That's why we wanted to come down to Little Italy. The museum was founded in 2001. It was founded as a result of the exhibit I did at the New York Historical Society on the Italians of New York, 5 Centuries of Struggle and Achievement. It was hugely successful. People wanted to have a museum. So in 2001, I was chartered by the University of the State of New York and ran exhibits through the City University, where I was the dean of the Calandra Institute for a number of years until we did that exhibit at the Historical Society. And then, I was looking for a space and looking for a place that made sense. Well, what makes more sense? What could make more sense than Little Italy, which was the largest Italian colony outside of Italy in the 1920s?
And can we talk about this building that we're in right now?
Well, this is Banca Stabile that we're in right now. Was founded here at this location in 1885 by Francesco Rosario Stabile. He came from a small town outside of Naples called Castelcivita in the province of Salerno. And he came here at the age of 20 years old. He had fought with Garibaldi. He came to make his fortune. He didn't first come to this corner. He came to 74 Mulberry Street, where he had his first bank. You didn't have to be licensed in those days to be a banker.
Really?
He just opened up a store. And eventually the state, when he got after him, when he opened up the place over here, because what would happen is your paisans, your countrymen, would come to your bank. If you were from Naples, you would go to Banca Stabile, or you'd go to another bank that was run by Neapolitans, or if you're Sicilian, you go to Sicilian Bank. They spoke your language. They wrote in your language. They could handle your correspondence for you. They could find you jobs, get you housing, and do all those types of things. So this was in this corner, though, he built in 1885, and they operated as a bank until 1932. They closed after the Depression hit them hard, and then they just operated their travel business, which was a lot of passenger ships going back and forth to Italy. In the early part of the 20th century, there were a lot of the tramp steamers. In the middle of the 20th century, in the 50s and 60s, you had a lot of people coming in after World War II. It was a different immigration. They were still coming, though, and they were using until around 1965, 1970. Then air travel really became big, and then that business dropped off.
I have a friend named Frankie Stabile. Or Stabile.
Stabile, really.
What's the
Stabile is the right pronunciation.
Stabile
means stable in Italian.
What's the probability that he's related to royalty in some way?
Wow. Whether he's related to these bank family, it's possible. I mean, we have found people that come in that are related.
Is this bank still, is that family still prominent family.
Well, they still own several of the properties around here. On the northeast corner, they own those 2 buildings. They also own the building where Angela's restaurant is. They used to own the one on the other corner and the other corner. So they owned one time they owned all 4 corners and the buildings adjacent to them. So this was their locus of control. Their operation was right here. Very prominent family, very prominent. It's possible, but Stabile is a common name. You will find
it is.
You will find
It was more of a joke.
You will find that there are a lot of non-related Stabiles that are in America today.
Yeah, Stabile is a common name. It's like even mentioned in Goodfellas, the iconic movie. In that one scene. I don't know if you like talking about that or the mafia and things like that. That's probably brought up a lot and kind of like a sore spot, right, on the Italian-American community and everything.
Well, one of the reasons why I did this museum was I wanted to tell our story our way. Hollywood tells it their way. Mm-hmm. According to Hollywood, you would think that 99.9% of all Italians were in organized crime. But the opposite is true. 99.9% of all Italian Americans are not in organized crime. Matter of fact, they've been victims of organized crime very often, like the Black Hand, which was very prevalent in the early part of the 20th century, which was Italian on Italian crime, where they would be preyed upon by their own people who would extort money for them. If they didn't give it to them, they would harm their families or blow up their businesses. So I'm sensitive to it for a lot of reasons. I fought a major suit of discrimination at the City University of New York for Italian Americans, and it keeps you back, keeps you down in some places, because people can still say, well, if you got ahead, must be because they knew somebody in the mafia or something like that. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Nobody got me into Columbia University because they knew somebody in the mafia, and nobody put my son in Harvard because he was, and that's true.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, well, and that's what I call making in America. But it didn't happen because I knew some mafia don. What would he know about Harvard? I mean,
well, look, I agree with you in that this concept of the mafia is definitely a sore spot. However, I do not agree with downplaying it or pretending it didn't happen, because I must be in that 0.01 percentile, because I know someone close to me who is a part of that lifestyle. My papa, my dad's dad. My grandfather on my mother's side was not in that life, however. He was a shoe shine boy as a kid, and then worked as a tool and die maker.
Tool and die maker.
Tool and die maker.
Not a die press cutter, a maker. He made
tool and die. Yeah, that's what he did. He made lamps.
That's
so many. He has so many lamps. I have inherited all of them also. I
that's
still
awesome.
have everything that he has. But like I said, Papa was involved, and he's not a bad guy either. Actually, the opposite is true. He's a family man. He'd give you the shirt off his back, and I don't know anyone who doesn't respect him. He grew up with these guys. They were his friends, and he never did anything serious. He was into craps and football slips.
Those are seen by most people as like victimless crimes.
They were always little things.
But when you see a movie like Goodfellas, you realize the violence that took place also, and does take place. And it's a lot of intimidation.
He says it's a pretty realistic movie, and he knew some of those guys in it. He knew like Tommy and the guy Jimmy, Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci's characters. He knew those guys. He never was completely friends with them or anything like that, but he knew of them, and he's seen them at the clubs, that they had all over, all these different clubs. And when he refers to clubs, he's referring to the different families, different ball clubs. Mm-hmm. So, but I just thought that was an interesting word he used.
Well, I guess it's
But you never had any of that
nicer word
growing up.
I grew up in the Bronx. I mean, I know it was around.
Yeah, it was. I mean,
it was around, but it wasn't around me.
Bronx Tale is about Belmont Avenue, right?
Actually,
Chaz
Chaz is a good friend of mine.
He is.
Chaz took, and that movie is about him.
Right.
Cologio was him.
Right.
So that did happen, and of course we all know that existed. These neighborhoods were unfortunately run by people like that. And I'm sorry about your grandfather, but I don't think it did us any good, because it held us back for 2 generations, because we didn't make it into mainstream America because we had all of this holding us back. Nobody wanted to step outside of their own environment. They were afraid to. Mm-hmm. And if you did, you ran away and you took away your Italianness, became an Anglo, or tried to be an Anglo. And that wasn't, I don't think it's a healthy thing psychologically for that, for people to give up their own ethnicity. But yet they were ashamed, and rightly so.
Would you say Italians are like Latins, kind of? Because weren't they founded by like the Latines? One of my
you know this
one of my friends.
This is a very big topic. I mean, you're opening up a whole.
Well, I'd love to talk about it. My friend, his name is Anthony Gaetano Pape, whatever. And he was telling me about this, how Italians are actually Latin because the Latines who inhabited central and south central Italy in the first millennium
Well, you know,
BC.
but we're not just Latines. I mean, like when you look at the boot of Italy, and you understand it sticks out in the middle of the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in the Mediterranean has passed through there. So there's so many different cultures that have come through Italy. I mean, in southern Italy, which most of us in America can
During that
identify
time when
with.
Everybody moved here to Little Italy,
Right.
They came from like the Naples area primarily, right?
Well, this street is called the Neapolitan Street. You also have the Sicilian Street, which is Elizabeth Street, but you have the Pugliese, the Calabrese. They all came from the southern part of Italy. And, you know, this was a very much a southern Italian area. And everybody in southern Italy came from someplace else. I mean, you have Sicily is located right in the middle of the Mediterranean, you know, so close to Tunisia, you know, and the Saracens, the Africans, the Greeks came in. And there was Magna Graecia, and you have the Ionians and you have the Sicils. So there's so many different, and the Albanians came in also as well.
Yeah.
So
They're coming in now, right?
But there's so many different groups that have passed through there. It's really hard to say that they're one group. They're not. They're absolutely not. And if you go up to Trentino in the north, they'll tell you they're Austrian. You know, so Italy is a real melting pot of the Mediterranean.
This is a very interesting topic. My mother's my great grandfather came here, right? Her grandfather from San Lorenzo Maggiore, which is in Campania, right outside, like an hour outside Naples. And I've been over there. I've hung out with all our cuginos and whatever. I can't even speak Italian. I'm just sitting there and everybody's speaking Italian. And I love it how everybody, doesn't matter how far off the branches of the tree are, how far they are, you're still family and everybody considers you. They come on in here, we'll give you a place, right? Yeah, buy the propane tank and you could stay there for like a month if you want to, which is awesome. But one word that I learned is this word Teroni, right? They have a lot of racial disparity between the North and the South still to this day, right? With the people in the North, like Torino, they kind of talk down on people from the South.
No, that's always been the case. That's always been the case, and it's really a racial thing.
Yeah. Because
the people in the South are seen as being mixed blood, whereas the ones in the North, like I mentioned before, you know, are really seen as being almost like Aryans. You know,
the German
influence, German-French influence in the North, and the South is looked down upon. They're looked upon as being lazy, but it was a different society. You know, Italy was only unified in 1861,
right?
By Garibaldi. Right. But you have to understand the big difference between the North and the South. In the South, you had the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, which was a feudal estate.
Okay.
You know, that was a.
See, I don't really know about all this stuff as much as I would like to.
It was a kingdom. Mm-hmm. And you know, and you had two classes. It was a two-class society. You had the rich and the poor. The rich were the aristocracy. The poor were the serfs. Prior to 1822, they were serfs. Your grandparents and my grandparents were probably serfs. Great-grandparents, you know, were probably serfs.
What is a serf?
The difference between a serf and a slave: a serf is indentured to the land. It's like you're part of the land. Mm-hmm. So if
like an American Indian,
no, not the same. A feudal lord might pass off the land from one baron to another baron. The land would pass from one baron, and so would everybody on the land. The serf had to stay and continue to work that land.
And continue to farm and herd sheep.
So it couldn't be sold like a slave from one landowner to another, but was indentured to the land. Everything on the land belonged to the lord. You know, the rabbits, the deer, the grass, everything, and the people. They belonged to the lord. And there's some really interesting rights. I mean, you've probably seen the movie Braveheart, right? Mm-hmm. In the movie Braveheart, they use the right of il signore. And the right of il signore is when the lord is allowed to, and by custom did, take the bride on the wedding night before the groom.
Wow.
Because he was the lord.
That's crazy. So they had that going on?
It's not crazy. It's happened.
Yeah, but I just, from the perspective
from our perspective today, it sounds crazy.
It does.
But that's what it was.
Maybe
so you have to understand. What I'm trying to explain to you is the South was so much different than the North, that it was so much more. And the North saw it as being backward, besides being the fact that it was racially mixed, because they weren't advanced. And they were, like I said, only the aristocracy went to school. There was no education.
Mm-hmm.
So, they were really more than dirt poor. George Washington Carver described the conditions of the Southern peasant even after 1865 as being worse than the African-American slaves and freed slaves in America.
And so that's why they fled, right?
Yeah.
And then they came over here.
Well, they fled for as soon as they had the opportunity to do so, and that was because of steamships.
So can we talk about Garibaldi? Because I don't really know that much about Garibaldi. However,
what would you like to know?
Tell me about him. What did he
Giuseppe
do?
Garibaldi is the George Washington of Italy.
Okay.
I mean, Garibaldi, was a very heroic figure. Not only was he heroic in Italy, but also in Latin America, in Bolivia, in Brazil, in Argentina. He is revered because he was like the Che Guevara of the 19th century, because he was actually there fighting for freedom for them, for their republics. But when the call came for Italy to go back to Italy, to unite Italy, Garibaldi left. And at that time he was in the United States. He was living with Antonio Meucci on Staten Island. And Antonio Meucci was a candle maker who was the first one to invent the telephone, long before Alexander Graham Bell.
What?
Yes, that's true. It's been documented, and it's been acknowledged by the United States Congress. Antonio Meucci had the first working model of a telephone. I don't know if it was the first or not, but the first we know about. And it was before Bell. And unfortunately, Meucci got sick, and his wife couldn't pay the money to renew the patent agreement. So literally hours after the agreement expired, in the patent office, Bell ran in and patented his telephone, and the rest is history. What I tell the kids, and as I had a group this morning, I told them, I said, it's not enough to be smart, and be an inventor. You also have to know what to do with your invention and how to get it marketed and how to raise the funds necessary. Well, Meucci was a genius at inventing, but he wasn't a genius at business or promoting himself. Also had a disadvantage. He didn't know the language. He was Italian, wasn't American, did no English, whereas Alexander Graham Bell did.
And he lived out in Staten Island, huh? That's where I live right now.
Yeah, and you should go see the Garibaldi Meucci Museum. It's out there too.
Yeah, I should.
It's a little small house, but it's dedicated to Garibaldi and Meucci. They have one of Garibaldi's red shirts there. Anyway, so Garibaldi goes back to Italy. He arrives in Sicily after leaving Genoa with 1,000 red shirts, and he gets the partisans all to unite around him, and they free Sicily and then go over the Straits of Messina and then up to Caserta. And they hands over the kingdom.
I know where Caserta is.
Hands over the kingdom to it's gorgeous, right?
Well, yeah.
It hands over the kingdom of the two Sicilies to King Umberto, who then becomes the king of the first unified Italy of a constitutional monarchy. It doesn't become a republic until after World War II.
It didn't become okay. So here's the thing. This is kind of
it's relatively a new country.
So yeah, I know it is. It's weird. So I can get my citizenship there, I believe. Do you know more about this? About getting your?
Well, I'm an Italian citizen.
What's that?
I'm an Italian citizen. I got it through my grandfather.
I think I can get that also.
It depends on what you have in terms of documentation. My father was born before my grandfather became a United States citizen. My grandfather became a United States citizen in 1922. Although he never told me, I suspect that he became a citizen in 1922 because of the Red Scare. In America at that time, the United States was in fear that there was a radical movement moving into the country that would take over the country. And if you were a foreigner, you weren't an American citizen, you were a suspect. I think he probably might have been influenced by that and became a citizen at that time. But my father was born in 1910, so because my father was born before my grandfather became an American citizen, even though my father was born in America, he was entitled to citizenship. So because he was entitled to citizenship, which he never claimed. I claimed it for him posthumously.
Yes.
Okay? And then he got his citizenship, and I got mine. And now my son, who is 30 years old, an architect, is in London working as an architect on his European passport.
Nice. Yeah, so this is I love it how they do this, though. Are there other countries that do that?
Oh, sure.
They do?
Other countries, some are easier, some are more difficult.
What exactly are the parameters? They have to have left after the unification of Italy, right?
No, there's a whole lot. That's just the only one. That's only one of the ways. There are about 20 different ways you can become an Italian citizen, and you really need to go to the website of the Italian consulate In New York, they list them in English and in Italian. You can read about them. There's all different ways in which you can become an Italian citizen. Mine was one way. There's other ways too.
Yeah, I think I've gone over it, and I talked to somebody about it who does this. And they said that I would qualify. You just have to go, and it's weird because it's like on either line or whatever, either your mother's or your father's.
Yeah, but you know, there are advantages to being an Italian citizen, being a European citizen. I mean, and today especially, unfortunately, you know, sometimes waving an American passport today is not, you know. It may be politically correct in America, but it can cause you problems. I was talking to a medical doctor. He's very conservative and whatnot, but he was. I mentioned to him that, hey, listen, you know, socialized medicine isn't so bad. Being an Italian, that's the second best healthcare system in the world. He just laughed at me and then just shot me down, told me all the reasons why I was an idiot for saying that, and America is the best. America has the best health system in the world. Still does, and I just hope with what we're doing, it doesn't depreciate. Okay, well, I guess there is a disparity because according to the World Health Organization, Italy is ranked number 2. So this stat is just not true. I mean, why would the WHO say that? Well, there are a lot of Italian specialists. Right. Also, I mean, they're excellence in so many fields. I mean, not only are they excellence in architecture, you know, it's everything that they do. I mean, a lot of people don't know that even in the eyeglass industry, I mean, they're phenomenal. They really are. No, I saw that on 60 Minutes, right? That's where they make all glasses. Yeah, I mean, but it's not in robotics also. They're technologically very superior. It's just what it is. We can both agree that they're superior in a vast majority of things. No, that's not to be ethnocentric, but it just happens to be a fact. It's a fact. I feel the same way. No, but what about Columbus? This whole thing with Columbus. You know, this is a very touchy situation too, right? I actually have. It's not touchy to me. I have a Columbus Day shirt that I made. This is my Columbus Day shirt. It says Captain America, just like the Captain Morgan guy, and he has his foot on the world. You know, people will laugh at that. And people have a lot to say when it comes to Columbus Day. They always... Well, unfortunately, the quincentenary brought it all out, where it gave groups an opportunity to voice their opinions so they can get them out there. I don't know how anti-Columbus they really are, but how much they really just wanted to get their positions out there. To be quite frank about it, there were terrible things that were done to Native Americans, but they weren't done by Christopher Columbus. No? And no. No, they weren't done by Christopher Columbus. First of all, he was a man of his time. He was in the things that happened in Europe at that time and the way people were treated, that was the norm. So to judge him in the context of today's society is foolish. It's not realistic. It's not practical. That's true. Not reasonable. You know, but and when you talk about the atrocities that were committed towards Native Americans, well, a lot of those atrocities were committed by Native Americans towards Native Americans. They practiced genocide. They killed tribes. They practiced, human sacrifice. I mean, we didn't do that, you know. So yeah, we may have brought pestilence, and we may have brought disease with us because we had it ourselves. But we also did bring a lot of good things. I don't agree with that whole philosophy. I think the Native Americans should have been treated better, and I think we didn't. Not we necessarily, but those who came here and did what they did were wrong in doing a lot of the things that happened to them, by all means. But I don't think particularly do not think that Italians were responsible. Yeah, I mean, Italians came here, and then everybody else started coming here as well, right? The Spanish, they did a lot of this. Spanish did a lot of damage. Yeah, they did a lot of damage too. The conquistadors really were very ruthless. They did. But yet at the same time, when you look at the experience of Italians in Argentina or Brazil and then in the United States, it's a big difference. Italians in Argentina and Brazil are accepted very much as a part of the fabric of the country. They don't even consider themselves to be Italian Brazilians or Italian Argentinians as we do in America, because there's less emphasis in the non-English speaking countries of racial differences. America is based on a racist society. It's based upon slavery, the African slavery. Constitution of the United States is a racial document in terms of giving less rights to one group over another. I mean, that's racist. Yeah. That's not the case in South America. That's interesting. So the experience here, not only for Italian Americans, but for all of the groups, is quite different than it is in other parts of the world. And you find this more prevalent in English-speaking countries. it's because of their culture and their feelings of superiority and belief that, white is right.
What is this behind you here?
Well, what I have behind me is an authentic Neapolitan presepio, which is, of course, a nativity scene. This is based upon what Charles V, who was the king of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies back in the 1700s, liked so much. Now, all of these characters that we have here, the townspeople, are all made, the figures are made out of terracotta, clay, and the garments are made out of silk and cottons and brocade that are handmade in the street of San Arminio in Naples. And all these pieces are handmade with devotion. They're acts of love, and they're absolutely gorgeous. Everything from the fish merchants, the olive merchants, the wine merchants. Of course, you have the three kings as well. You even have Punchinello, because the Neapolitans really believed to include everybody. They have the clowns in it as well. In the center, though, is a very significant. Here's the difference between a Neapolitan presepio. Presepi is like crib, and a nativity scene that you might see in another country. Most nativity scenes that you see have a manger with a little crib inside of it. Could be a cave, but a stable basically. Not here. What you have instead, even though you have the animals around the Christ, you have it in a temple, and you notice the temple is broken. Temple's in ruins. The symbolism, of course, is that the old is destroyed, and with the birth of the new and the birth of the Christ coming out. So it's the symbolism as well. This became a competition amongst the nobility to have the best nativity scene, best presepio, and then eventually it was taken over by the aristocracy, and then after the aristocracy, the churches in each town did it as well.
I've been to Italy for Christmas, and they are big on their nativity scenes, right? Everybody has them like in their houses and everything.
This is like their Christmas tree.
Yeah,
they're
really big on.
This is the symbol
and they
of
pass
Christmas.
it around and kiss it and stuff,
Yeah.
right? Auguri, you know that word, right?
Of course.
That was interesting. So prior to today's interview, you told me that you spoke with a class. What sort of topics did you or do you cover?
I basically give them a very brief understanding, but a history and try to put it in the context of how this immigration started, why it started, who came here, why they came here, what happened to them when they got here, and where they are today. I do that all in about an hour. So it's a lot crammed into 1 hour.
Can you give me a little breakdown of that? Maybe not a whole hour worth, maybe 15 minutes?
Well, who came here? The peasants mostly came here. They came on the steamships.
Right, you said you had to wait for the advent of the steamship to come around before a major...
Yeah, but it came around at the same time, because after 1861, with the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies being destroyed, and the Kingdom of Italy, which was... they were then able to leave. They could leave from after 1865. Prior to that, they couldn't leave.
Right, because they were attached to the ground.
They couldn't leave. They couldn't leave. After that, they were able to leave. They were able to become part of, but they needed a way to get there, and the new modern transportation was the steamship. It took 4 weeks, a miracle, to get to America. You cross the Atlantic Ocean. Tramp steamers, the bottom of the ship, terrible conditions, come to America. And then, instead of being the streets paved with gold, which is, of course, what they were told, which they didn't really believe, but instead they saw these beautiful skyscrapers as they came into New York Harbor. It was like Oz. And, they had the Madonna or the Statue of Liberty as they came in, too. It was all inspiring. I mean, you thought you probably had landed on Mars, because they didn't come from this.
It's inspiring now to me.
It's inspiring now, but can you imagine, just imagine being a peasant in a rural town.
Oh, man. I mean,
and living in a dirt hut.
Seeing it right now today, there's nothing, I mean, it hasn't changed that much, right? It's still like
it's
that.
Still pretty, it's not as bad as it was.
But it's in those little towns, that little town.
But then you come and you see this. My God. I mean, people still come to New York and still say, my God, even if they come from other cities. But because it's New York. But coming from where they came to coming to this, it's incredible. Of course, then they got here and they didn't have to... They lived in houses with windows instead of holes in the walls. Instead of dirt floors, they had wood floors. And instead of going down to the creek to get water, they could get cold running water in the house. They're cold water flats. Bathroom, instead of a hole in the ground behind the house, they had a bathroom in the house. So it was a big step up for them, huge step up for them. And, they embraced it. So here they got food, clothing, and shelter, all they needed. And they felt they were successful. Second generation became more successful and more educated, and the third generation became part of the American fabric. Yet, for some reason, like you, Bobby Pickles, you reach out to your Italian heritage.
Why is that?
That's a good question.
I identify with Italy way more than any other part of my makeup.
Because
your middle name is V, right? It starts with V.
Vincent,
is it Vincent?
Vincent.
My middle name is Vincent also, right? It's Robert Vincent Piccirillo. My grandfather on my mother's side, the one who's a tool and die maker, his name was Vincent Iannotti. That's how they pronounce it over there, whatever. But I grew up with this guy telling me how awesome Italy is, basically. He taught me Italian words, shared stories, played for me the music, various opera tenors from Enrico Caruso to Luciano Pavarotti.
That's great. He had a positive influence on you in terms of your identity. Not only your ethnicity, but your identity, because you're an American. Primarily you're
right,
American.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think of it as American Italian now.
But he gives you a positive feeling about who you are in America based upon your lineage, which unfortunately a lot of people weren't allowed to have because, coming here there was so much discrimination, especially at the turn of the century. If you didn't speak English, you didn't get a job. Didn't have an English-sounding last name, you didn't get a job. So, you really couldn't get housing unless you lived in the Italian section.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really difficult. And then World War II, if you didn't speak English and you spoke German, Japanese, or Italian, you were speaking the enemy's language.
Mm-hmm.
And there were posters that the United States put up all over the place. Don't speak the enemy's language.
That's crazy to think about, right?
It's true. It's true. So, it was tough. Did
anybody in your family
fight?
Yet
with all of that, yes, my father fought in World War II. But with all of that, largest ethnic group in World War II was Italian Americans. But with all of that, this culture, this identity, still lingers on. And yet many people, of course, when they come to it, all they know about is what they read in the books. And mostly what they read in the books is about ancient Rome and the Renaissance. That's mostly what they read about. They don't read about the rest of it because not too much was written. It's being written now. They write about what it was like in southern Italy now, as other groups have written about their experiences. And that's a good thing because we're starting to really collect our history. And as you do that, not only collect your history, you collect your identity. And part of your identity is part of who you are. Without that ethnicity and without that identity, what are you if you don't have your history?
But it's being lost now, though. I mean, I don't have any kids now, but when I do,
I don't think that's true. I think your kids, if they choose to, will look it up themselves. If they don't choose to, then it's not that strong a feeling for them.
I have a crazy idea of going back to Italy and then marrying an Italian girl.
Sure, there's a lot of Italian girls who would love to marry you.
To keep that going in some kind of crazy way.
It's not. That's not a crazy way, but
it's not.
It's not crazy, but at the same time, I don't know that you have to do that to keep it going. It's such a wonderful culture. 60% of all the world's art comes from Italy. That's UNESCO's stuff.
Fashion. There's so many things.
So non-Italians like to associate with Italians. They love us.
Right. What do they say? Like, there's like two types of people in the world. Those are Italian. Those who wish they were.
I think I've heard this before.
What did you have anything to do with the PBS documentary that was out? Like,
They have a lot of different documentaries. I've been on some of them, and some of them I haven't. I don't know which one you're referring to.
But so you've been involved in some documentaries about?
Oh yeah, I did the Italians in America for A&E. I was the historical consultant for it.
That's nice. So you
Arts and Entertainment.
They come to you in order to produce it.
Yeah, I wrote the script, helped them with the script. Do all that background information.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a museum at that time, and now we have more and more information. We're discovering things all the time.
Was Fiorello LaGuardia Jewish or Italian?
Both.
He was both, right?
Yeah.
Because it's on his mother's side, the Jewish ancestry.
Right. He was raised though in Arizona.
He was?
Yeah, his father was in the army. He was raised in an army camp in Arizona, and he felt he spoke Italian, he spoke English, and he spoke Yiddish, so he could appeal to all the ethnic groups that he needed to in New York City to be elected. And he was an interpreter at Ellis Island for a while too for the Italians. But he had a problem with the negative image of Italians, and many people do this, not just LaGuardia, to cast off the negative images. What he did was, for example, he outlawed organ grinders in New York. There used to be men on corners with a a box that you would have a crank on it. You would grind it like this, and a tinny sound would come out of it. They'd put rolls in there. It was like a music box. And they were called organ grinders. And they would usually have a monkey with them, and the monkey would have a little cup and collect money. LaGuardia considered that begging and didn't like it, so he banned it from New York City. Well, a few generations later, Mario Cuomo becomes governor, and he reinstates that organ grinders are allowed because he doesn't see it as a negative thing anymore. LaGuardia was more sensitive to the slurs and the negativism that was going out there. Mario Cuomo was already insulated from some of it.
How do you feel about Andrew Cuomo?
How do I feel about him? I think he's a great governor.
Yeah, I do too. Absolutely. You think he's a good shot to become president someday?
He's got about as good a shot as any Italian American does.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as a politician.
I think he's definitely a stand-up guy.
Man, he's got a good shot at it, but he may be just a little bit too liberal for the rest of the country. Some of his stance may not fly well in Peoria. But yeah, he's definitely qualified. No question about it.
Yeah.
So is Christie, though.
Christie, you think? Oh yeah, that's the other side of the spectrum, right there.
But and there was an article recently, I think, when Christie spoke about what him and Andrew have in common. You know what it is?
What is it?
Both have Sicilian mothers.
Nice.
Well, there's some. You've heard about the Jewish mother, I suppose. Everybody knows about the Jewish mother who pushes the kid. Sicilian mothers are pretty much the same.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, my mother's pretty overbearing.
Well, Italian mothers are really for their children, as all mothers should be and are. But there's a certain push that they have, and when it comes to their kids, they'll do anything.
I know. Are you involved in like Italian American clubs or anything like that?
We do a lot of different activities on Thursday nights, and we have a lot of different people that come in. Some of them, like the Sicilian Connection, 11 million people in the United States can trace their history of their families back to Sicily. So that's a big population, and it's a new group. It's not like, the old ones. Like when I say the old ones, in times gone by, there were a lot of different social clubs, but they were all based upon the towns that people came from.
Mm-hmm.
Today you're finding less of that as you find people wanting to identify with their culture. Third generation wanting to identify with their culture don't want to necessarily identify with Kokomo, where my grandfather came from. They want to identify either with Italy or maybe Sicily. So you find groups coming in like that. And that's a difference, a big difference. But they're still out there. Then there are still also some of the social clubs. I mean, there are very different levels, very different stratas between the immigrant societies and the Italian-American societies and the American-Italian societies, like the National Italian-American Foundation,
mm-hmm.
which is an American-Italian society.
How about De Niro? Have you ever met De Niro before?
I met Bob De Niro.
You have?
Yeah. I was actually honored with him at the city council. If you go on Google and you put his name and my name in, our pictures will pop up.
That's great. There's a lot of stuff on the internet.
Obviously, he's a little more famous than me. But go ahead.
There's a lot of stuff on the internet about his Italian ancestry, though, right? It's pretty watered down.
It's his ancestry is he's a New Yorker.
But I've been to Campobasso, where his grandparents are from, because my cousin went to that school there, and she graduated, so I had to go to her graduation in Campobasso, and I always remembered that. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is where De Niro's grandparents are from.
But he's Italian American. He comes from New York City.
Bobby Milk is what they called him, right? Because he's a little lighter skinned.
Yeah, I mean he's an Italian American. You couldn't be the actor he is without that heritage.
Yeah.
I mean his father was an artist, but like he couldn't have been an actor like that without it. So yeah, definitely Italian American. There's been some controversy with him. I mean, some of the organizations have criticized him because of the negative roles that they feel that he's played, including The Godfather, which I didn't think was so negative. But I don't look at it that way. I mean, he's an actor and he's very skillful at what he does.
You don't enjoy any of these mafia movies? Like some
mafia movies? No.
Goodfellas? No. It's
absolutely not.
It's such an iconic movie.
Absolutely not.
It's fantastic.
Absolutely not.
I know like every word by heart.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It is.
What would
I
be
think
it's
I think it's a good. I think people should watch it because they should understand what the mafia is really all about. It's not about what they saw in The Godfather.
Right.
And I think that's good in that perspective because maybe it'll be a deterrent for people glorifying it, because there's nothing to be glorified there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
what about
when they kill Joe Pesci in the cornfield mercilessly,
I cried during that.
They beat him to death with a
during
bat.
Casino. At the end of Casino, when I saw that, I was sitting right next to my brother in the movie theater, and a tear came out of my eye. Just seeing, because he watches his brother get killed right in front of him, right, with a baseball bat. Then he gets buried after that. I just thought that would be the worst, seeing your brother.
That was Casino. That wasn't.
It was Casino.
Okay, well, that's the same thing.
But it's the same. Yeah, it's an extension of Goodfellas.
Same thing.
It's the same cast. But, I find it fascinating that Chaz Palminteri. A Bronx Tale is yet another favorite movie of mine. I think it's a shame what happened to Francis Capra, the actor who played Calogero Anello in the film. I believe he's in prison for life or something. Well, a long stint anyway.
De Niro tried to help him, but he couldn't. I mean, who knows what happens? And he's not even Italian.
Oh, yeah, he's not. He's like Colombian or something.
Yeah. But he had that look.
He did have the look.
He had the look. It's unfortunate. I don't think you should glorify the subset of society. I think it's a mistake. I mean, if you want to glorify power in America, glorify the titans of industry. I mean, we've had great successes in American industry. Ken Langone, Dick Grasso, Joe Grano, Mario Cuomo, today Andrew Cuomo, Chris Christie. We've had incredible, successful Geraldine Ferraro.
Mm-hmm.
A former speaker of Nancy Pelosi. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've had incredibly successful people who've been powerful. We don't need to glorify this subset that should not exist any longer. You watched those movies. Did you watch Gomorrah?
Yes, I did. I
okay.
saw.
And after you watch Gomorrah, you still have a high respect for these people.
The Gomorrah is not actually the mafia.
It's the same.
It's a separate thing.
It's the same thing.
It's a separate thing.
It's done the same way.
But it's actually not.
Did you see Excellent Cadavers?
I've heard of that. What is that? Is that a documentary?
That's the documentary film about the killing of Borsellino and Falcone.
Yes,
judges.
I did. I saw that.
And you could still glorify them?
No, that was horrible. That was horrible that they did that.
Excellent Cadavers refers to the idea. That's what they call the corpses of the people that the mafia killed. Excellent cadavers. That's where the term comes from. Alexander Styles wrote the book. And when you see what they do and how people leave Sicily and Naples also because they have no opportunities because of that type of environment. They want to get away from that. They shouldn't have to leave their country to do that.
My mother's cousins, they live in like a little shanty apartments in Naples, just like that movie Gomorrah, just like it, exactly like it. And I went up in there, and it was just it was crazy to have seen that movie and then be in there. This is where that kind of stuff takes place, and it still does. Still very violent. Look, I'm not a proponent of violence, and I'm not glorifying the mafia, but it is a true part of history, not just Italian-American history, but American history in general. And these people were real. I mean, ask Papa. He was kind of part of that.
Well, it was your grandfather. Of course you're going to feel close to him, and because there was a paternalistic side to it, too. In those days, a paternalistic side is that they protected, in quotes, the neighborhoods that they were involved with. But that protection came at a price.
The way he put it is, those were his friends, and if they asked him to do something, he was going to do what his friends asked him to do, basically. Anyway.
I understand it, but don't agree with it.
Oh, how about the Feast of San Gennaro? Can we talk about that?
Feast of San Gennaro is the longest-running Italian feast in New York City. It's 86 years old, continuously running. The only feast that didn't exist was during 9/11, when there were no public assemblies allowed. The first public assembly after 9/11 was actually the Columbus Day Parade. But during the month of September, they were not allowed. Every September 19th, we have the Feast of San Gennaro here in Little Italy. And, of course, it's on Mulberry Street because it's Neapolitan Street. And I'll give you a little bit more background about that. It starts at the Church of Most Precious Blood. It's the most precious blood of St. Gennaro, not of Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from the idea that Gennaro's blood was sacred because in 305 A.D., Diocletius, who was the emperor of Rome, killed the bishop of Naples, Gennaro. Cut off his head. They saved his blood in 2 cruets. Those are like you have in a church, the 2 little cruets that they bring up to put the water and wine in, but they put it in 2 cruets, and they reside in the Church of St. Gennaro in Naples. Now, on September 19th, they'd have a procession in his honor. So they take out the cruets, and they march them through the procession, and they liquefy from solid to liquid. It's called the miracle of liquefaction. And the people of Naples believe that as long as the blood liquefies, it'll be a good year. If it doesn't liquefy, tragedy will strike Naples, such as Vesuvius will erupt.
Oh,
Okay?
Yes.
So, as a matter of fact, in the year of 9/11, it didn't liquefy. So every year we will listen outside. Somebody will call up their paisans in Naples and find out if the blood liquefied or not, and then we'll make the announcement on the street.
So this is the Italian Groundhog Day.
Yep, the Italian Groundhog Day. That's a good way of putting it. But let me tell you a little bit more about the Church of Most Precious Blood. It was established here on Mulberry Street by the Neapolitans in 1888. And it was built by the Neapolitans, well, actually was built for the Neapolitans by the Scalabrini Fathers, an Italian order. It was built because the Italians were being discriminated against. Old St. Patrick's Cathedral, not the new one, but the old one, is here on Mott Street. It was the first St. Patrick's Cathedral. And the Italians, which is within their section, it's only 2 blocks away, were not being allowed to have their sacrament of matrimony at the main altar. So, in protest, the Neapolitans decided they'd have their own church built. So they built the Church of Most Precious Blood, which is the Church of St. Gennaro. But by 1908, when my grandparents were married, that had changed, and my grandparents were married at the main altar in Old St. Patrick's. Sometimes you need parity. You need to have your own things in order for other people to respect you. That's why we need to have our own museum, too, so that people will respect us for this.
Absolutely. So, like, when people come down here, what should they do? They should come check out the Italian American Museum?
Yeah, well, they'll come in. We'll show them a video. We'll tell them the story. They'll look at the artifacts. They'll talk with some of the docents about some of the experience. They'll ask questions. We'll try to answer. It's a very congenial atmosphere, which most people find, I think, entertaining and also enlightening and enjoying.
And they go to the ItalianAmericanMuseum.org, correct?
Sure. www.italianamericanmuseum.org to get information, but they can also call us at 212-965-9000. We book group tours. We have Bob and Joanne who are doing that for us when you call them. We can hook you up with a traditional Italian-American restaurant where you can get a Sunday-type dinner there. We can go on a walking tour. We have walking tours also that we organize too of the entire neighborhood, which lasts between an hour and a half. So there's a lot of little things you can do. And although there isn't as many Italians down here, it's a lot of history. So the history is all down here. Very, very many. A lot of.
Where are the
places.
Italians now? In New York?
In New York, all over. You know, of the 5 boroughs, the largest number is in Queens, but you wouldn't know it because they're so dispersed.
Really, the largest numbers in Queens?
Of the 5 boroughs, yeah. Largest percentage
Whereabouts
is in
in
Staten
Queens?
Island.
The largest percent, yeah, out of 400,000, 200,000 claim. I just thought that was an interesting, staggering.
Largest percentage,
right?
yeah, okay, is in Staten Island, but the largest number is in Queens.
Correct.
Even
Yes,
larger than Brooklyn.
It's a larger population over
But
there.
it's more like, you know, 3rd and 4th generation.
Right.
So they're not as ethnic.
It's watered down.
It's not as ethnic. New York State has 17% Italian Americans in population. That's the largest voting group. I won't call them a block because they're not a block. They vote all over the place. They're liberals, conservatives, Republicans, Democrats. Italians don't fall under one banner. But about 24% of the voting population in New York State is Italian American.
You know, the largest per capita, I believe, is Connecticut, actually, where my parents are from, out of all the states.
Actually, I think it may be Rhode Island.
Yeah? Oh, Rhode Island's so small.
Close.
God, that's such a crazy small state, right? You drive right through there.
Yeah, but it's got a lot of Italians in it.
Yeah, well,
a lot of Italians in it. The whole Eastern Seaboard does. And
how do you feel about the Pope?
How do I feel about it?
Petrus Romanus? Do you know about that? Do you remember that? I went to Catholic school my entire life. Did you?
Yes, I went to Catholic school. Not my entire life, but my first 8 years.
I went my entire life. High school included, everything. And I remember specifically once that we were learning about St. Malachy, an archbishop in Ireland during the 12th century, who basically prophesied or predicted all the popes, 112 of them. And the list ends supposedly with Petrus Romanus, or Peter the Roman, whose pontificate will allegedly bring the destruction of the city of Rome and usher in the beginning of the apocalypse. By the way, although the church says it's a fraud, I still find it interesting. But do you think it's going to be the end of the Catholic Church as we know it, really? I mean, I feel like, honestly, people are becoming more secular all throughout the world, you know? And
Well,
organized
I think
religion's
there's no question about it. People, in Western civilization, people are more secular. But if you look at the trends, in emerging countries, the continent of Africa, Catholicism is on the rise.
Right.
All right?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's still a large Catholic population in South America too.
I mean, Italy is so interesting because it's really like part of the politics.
Yeah, and it's part of the politics, but it's also got the lowest birth rate. So it's like almost like, how does that happen? Supposed to be Catholic, you would think they would have a high birth rate, but they don't. People don't even replace themselves in Italy.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but when I think about it, I think the church will survive. It survived a few years, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, it survived a few thousand years, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy that at 600
I think
years
it'll evolve.
he's the first.
I think it'll evolve a little bit, and I think it'll change, but it won't change that much. I've had this conversation with other people who feel that the church hasn't changed quick enough to suit them, and I understand that, but I was born a Roman Catholic, and I'll die a Roman Catholic.
Me too. And I feel like even though I might get a little bit more liberal from this city, and I get away from a little bit of the Catholic teachings. I don't go to Catholic church every Sunday or whatever. I go on the major holidays. But for some reason, just like your ethnicity, you kind of, you always have that thing.
It's very comforting, too. I mean, it's like being part of your family. It's what you grew up with. So if you went to Catholic school like you did, and even though sometimes it wasn't always the best experience, maybe it is your experience. So it's what you know. So you want to be around what you know. You want to feel around what you're comfortable with. So that's what you'll do. So in times of tragedy, in times of joy, you want to be around institutions and individuals that you're comfortable with. So therefore, you'll be around the church.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I feel. I know it makes sense to me.
Dr. Joseph V. Scelsa, thank you so much for being on the Bobby Pickles podcast. I appreciate you inviting me down here and letting me talk with you about this awesome museum.
Bobby, you can come back again anytime.
1, 2, 3. FatEnzo.com. 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 FatEnzo.com.